with regard to, you've indicated, as we've been going, that you believe that post-traumatic stress disorder is characteristic of these tests, correct?
It's consistent.
Consistent, right? And
Yes,
you
sir.
know that that was Dr. Samuel's result. You knew that, right?
I think I did know that from Dr. DeMarte's report.
So you did know that. Were you also familiar with the rest of the documentation where Dr. Samuels actually indicates that this case could be a case of personality disorder, NOS, that needed to be investigated? Did you know anything about that?
No, sir.
You had conversations with the defense attorneys, didn't you?
Objection beyond the scope.
Overruled. Didn't you?
Judge, may we approach? You may.
You spoke with the defense counsel about Janine DeMarte, didn't you?
Yes, sir.
And in fact, they gave you information about Janine DeMarte, right?
Yes, sir.
And in fact, that information that they gave you about Janine DeMarte was the reason that it caused you to come in here and indicate that she was not trained with regard to some of these tests, right?
Partially.
Well, you talked about her report, right?
Yes.
And you...
I'd have to go back and look at the report. I mean, I didn't state that. I'm trying to think if that's still accurate, if there's nothing in the report. I'd have to go back and look at the report. I mean, I didn't state that. I'm trying to think if that's still accurate, if there's nothing in the report that would have indicated that. I have to go back and look at how she interpreted the MMPI and TSI and to see if in the report she indicated that those were no, I need to retract. In her report, she talked about a floating profile, and that was the reason the MMPI indicated borderline personality. So that would not be correct. And that would be a part of the suggestion that about either training and other things.
So when you told us a different answer earlier, that's your mistake then, right?
What was the different answer?
The previous answer to the questions was that there was nothing in report or anywhere else, anything that suggested that Dr. Janine DeMarte did not have the sufficient training with regard to these tests. Do you remember telling us that?
That was...
Yes or no?
I don't remember saying it the way you just did. That was a question about the TSI, and I indicated
All right, with
that.
regard to the TSI, weren't you asked about that question involving it? No? There was nothing either in her report, there was nothing in any other data that suggested to me that she was not trained in this. Do you remember telling me that?
No, sir.
You don't remember saying that to the jury previously?
Not about all the other tests.
No, I'm talking about this particular test involving the floating profiles. Do you remember telling us that?
Objection asked and answered.
Overruled.
Do you remember telling us that?
That there was nothing in her report about the floating profile?
Sir, we talked about her report.
Yes, sir.
Janine DeMarte's report, right?
Yes, sir.
Do you remember that I asked you, with regard to her report, whether or not there was anything in that report that suggested to you that she didn't know or lacked the training with regard to these?
Answer reflected the TSI. I don't recall you asking me about the floating
All right,
profile
so
or
it's
the other
about the
things.
TSI then.
Correct.
And so in this, and the TSI, is this the...
Answer reflected the TSI. I don't recall you asking me about the floating
All right,
profile
so
or
it's
the other.
about indicated to us as part of the questioning that part of the reason that you believe that she lacked the training with regard to these scales or this test was based on what the defense attorneys told you, right?
Yes.
But now you then want to talk about something else, right? About some other test, right?
I thought you were now generalizing it to the other tests.
Do you want to? No. My question to you is, isn't it true that now you started to talk about the MMPI, right?
I thought that's what you asked me.
No, then you thought wrong then, right?
Evidently, I'm not clear exactly what you're asking
So
me.
the only test where you believe that she didn't have any training with,
Yeah,
no,
if I
then you thought
misinterpret-
wrong then, right?
Evidently, I'm not clear exactly what you're asking
So
me.
the only test where you believe that she didn't have any training with,
Could you ask again?
and with regard to the TSI, so that we're clear,
To the report?
TSI.
No.
I'm talking about the TSI only,
Oh,
right?
and could you ask again?
And with regard to the TSI, so that we're clear, there's nothing in the report or any other data that suggests she needed training, she being Janine DeMarte,
Not in the report, that is correct.
and in any other data that you received, correct?
I think that's likely correct because I don't recall records that it would indicate that.
But because of what the defense attorneys told you, now you do have an opinion that she lacked training, right?
In part, also in part to the interpretation of the TSI
Sir, do you remember being asked that question by the jury?
by
Do you
the
remember?
jury.
Yes. And you don't remember being asked this question about the jury, about whether or not why you thought Janine DeMarte lacked training? Do you remember being asked that by the
Yes, I do.
And do you remember your answer?
I think so.
And do you remember that after that there was follow-up by defense counsel?
Yes, sir.
And the issue was laid out that you actually talked to them, right?
Yes, sir.
And at that time you indicated, oh, it was because of what they told me that I decided, or I realized that she lacked training. Do you remember saying that?
Yes, sir.
You also talked about compensation for the case. You're saying that that this case, you are getting paid for this case, right?
I'm not. Our institute, well, theoretically, our institute is.
Well, while you're out here, you're getting paid your wage, right?
That is correct.
How much do you make a year?
I make $117,500.
And your wage is being paid today when you came out here, right?
That is correct.
So the institute, it's not like you're not getting paid to come in here, though, right? In other words, you are getting paid whether you're there or you're here. Your time, even though you're still getting paid, your time is still going to be billed for the time that you were here, right?
Yes, the institute bills.
And how much for your time are we going to be billed? What is the hourly wage that is going to be billed?
It's $250 an hour. You're talking about for today? Because
For
it changed.
today in court as you testify.
It's $250 an hour, or it maxes at $2,500 a day.
Do you remember that you previously testified?
Change.
Today in court as you testify.
It's $250 an hour, or it maxes at $2,500 a day.
Do you remember that you previously testified in other proceedings involving your work? Do you remember testifying?
Oh, yeah.
Objection beyond the scope.
Approach.
remember testifying in the O'Rourke case that, on cross-examination, that you no longer treat patients?
I'm not sure if that,
Remember testifying in the O'Rourke case that, on cross-examination, that you no longer treat patients?
I'm not sure if that was in the O'Rourke case, in another case, but yes.
Well, 648, take a look at the bottom paragraph.
Yes, sir?
It indicates that that's what you testified to, right?
Yes, sir.
And it indicates that you devote all your time to consulting work relating to your specialty, right?
Yes.
This is part of your specialty, correct? Testifying.
It's one part.
When you indicated that you devote all of your time to consulting work, weren't you indicating that the majority of your money came from testifying?
Oh, no. It's never been that way. It's always been a small part of what I do.
But you have testified in different jurisdictions, right?
Yes, sir.
One of the other things that you talked about was that in terms of the trajectory, that you could never be 100% sure as to what the trajectory could be, right?
Yes, sir.
And rods from one end to the other, correct?
They do a variety of things. Yes,
Pardon?
they do a variety of things, yes.
And you're aware that to do trajectory, they actually have rods that go in what is perceived as the entrance wound to where it actually, they believe the bullet may have come to
Yes,
rest,
I have
right?
seen that.
But you don't do that sort of work, right?
No, sir.
You were also asked, well, in terms of the bleeding that was associated with this particular case, you indicated that in terms of the bleeding, couldn't it also be, in your experience, that the reason that there wasn't any bleeding along the track or where the shot to the head was because Mr. Alexander was already dead at the time he was shot, right?
That's what was asked.
And the answer is he could have been already, given your experience, he could have been dead at the time he was shot. And that would explain the lack of blood, right?
Yes, sir.
You also indicated that you really hadn't heard about this case prior to a couple of weeks ago. In other words, the facts of this case, or know anything about the case. Do you remember the jury asking you about that?
Yeah, they asked when I got involved. I said last November. I hadn't known I was testifying in this case until like a week and a half ago.
Judge, may we approach, please? telling us about was that you were familiar with people who get shot in the head, correct?
Somewhat.
And you were also telling us that with regard to these individuals, you were telling us that unless they get shot in a very specific way, they are still able to ambulate, correct?
In general,
And sir, all of this information that you were giving to us involved you reading some articles, right?
plus the,
Correct?
in general,
And sir, all of this information that you were giving us is, and then you have some articles that you read, correct?
3 cases, articles read, workshops attended.
And workshops that you attended did not have any cadavers there, right?
That's correct.
So really what you, in terms of your knowledge of what you have here, would you agree that in terms of experience, your experience is lesser than an individual who actually conducts the autopsies and actually sees the effects of the gunshot wounds?
Objection foundation is to experience.
Overruled.
Yes, I would agree with that.
Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, please go back to the jury room for approximately 10 minutes. Please remember the admonition.
Please stand for the jury.
Counsel, please approach.